Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I am going to share the actual Power BI and SQL interview questions that were asked in the client round of the LTI Mindtree interview. Okay. So my friend had already cleared the technical rounds as well as the HR round, but the company still scheduled a client interview before releasing the offer letter. So this is becoming quite common these days, okay, where the client wants to evaluate whether the candidate is right fit for the project before the offer is finalized. Okay, so in this video we will solve each of the Power BI and SQL questions that were asked in that client interview. I will explain not just the answers but also the concepts and the interview approach, so that you are asked the similar questions, you will be able to answer them confidently. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. So coming to the Power BI questions, the first question which was asked is what are dimension and fact tables. So a dimension table contains descriptive information about a business entity such as customer, product, employee or date. So it provides context for analyzing the data and usually contains a primary key with which it links the values of the fact table. Okay. So a fact table on the other hand, it stores measurable business data like sales, profit, quantity or cost. So it contains foreign keys that link to the dimension tables and is used for calculations and reporting. So you'll remember that a fact table contains all the measurable data about a particular transaction or an event, that is sales, profit, quantity, cost, and a dimension table contains all the attributes or the descriptive data for that particular transaction or the event, that is customer name, products, employees, date, all this. Okay. So coming to the next question, you need to dynamically select between total sales, total profit and total amount and display it in a card visual. So how will you implement this? So this is a very common Power BI interview question and the idea is very simple. So instead of creating 3 different card visuals, we will create only one card visual that changes its value on what the user selects from a slicer. So let us implement. So in the step 1, we will create a disconnected table. Okay. So we will be creating the table with the help of DAX function data table. So data table takes metric name as the name of the column and the string is the column data type. Okay. And the rows we are including, what are the rows? We are including total sales, total profit and total amount. So the name of the table is metric, and in metric the name of the column is metric name, which is of type string, and we are including the rows as total sales, total profit and total amount. Okay. So in the next step we have to create individual measures. Total sales is equal to sum of sales updated, which will calculate the total sales. Okay. For total profit I'll include total profit is equal to sum of sales of profit. Okay. And for total amount is equal to sum of sales of amount. Okay. So these are the values that will be displayed on the basis of the user selection. Okay. So in the next step we will create a dynamic measure. So here I am using 2 DAX functions, selected value and switch. The selected value, what is it doing? It is checking which option the user has selected in the slicer, and then the switch is used to compare the selection with the available options from the table, that is metric, right? So it is used for checking the available options from that particular table. It is checking that whether that option is matching with the user selection or not. So if they select total profit, it will return the total profit measure. Similarly, if they select the total amount, it will return the total amount measure. Okay. Now after creating the dynamic measure, we can implement the measure that we have created in a card visual, and we will, on the basis of user selection, that is whenever the user will select that metric name, that will give that particular value. So total sales will give the total sales value, the total profit will give the total profit value. Okay. Coming to the next question, what is a Power BI gateway and what are its types? So a Power BI gateway, it acts like a bridge for secure transfer of data between the on-premises data sources such as SQL Server database to Power BI service, which is cloud. So you have built a report or a dashboard in Power BI desktop, right? Using a data source which is in your local desktop. Okay. So I mean, it may be SQL Server database or any other database that you will use, which is located in your local desktop, which is on-premise data source. So when you are uploading the report or the dashboard in the Power BI service, there must be a link by how the data should be flowing from your local system to the Power BI service, right? Otherwise the refresh will fail. So there is no data storage which is done for the data for your reports which is published in the Power BI service. So here the concept of Power BI gateway comes. So it helps in transferring the data from your local system which is present in the on-premises data sources to the Power BI service, which is cloud. So with the help of Power BI gateway, we can schedule refreshes and we can refresh our dashboard and our data sets. So coming to the next part, what are the types of Power BI gateway? So there are two types. One is personal gateway and another is enterprise gateway. So personal gateway is used for individual analysts, which is who works on their own machines, and enterprise gateway is used for large teams and organizations. So personal gateway, we cannot integrate it with other apps, but enterprise gateway we can integrate it with other apps such as Power Apps or Power Automate. Okay. So coming to the next question, what are the different access rules for a workspace in Power BI service? So different access rules are from least to maximum level of access. First there is viewer. Okay, so a viewer can only view the contents of the dashboard which is published in a particular workspace. Okay, so he can only view the contents. Then there is contributor. So a contributor can edit the contents of the dashboard. He can download a dashboard from Power BI service to Power BI desktop, and he or she can publish the dashboard from Power BI desktop to Power BI service for at that dedicated workspace. He has the contributor level access in. Okay. Then there is member. So a member has all the features of a viewer and contributor, and a member can give a particular person an access to that particular workspace. He has the member access in, so he can give another person an access, either member or below member level access. So he can give another person a member level access or a contributor level access or a viewer level access for that dedicated workspace he is the member of. Okay, so then there is admin. So admin has the most powerful access. He has all the features of viewer, contributor as well as member, and additionally he can create a workspace and can delete a workspace also. Okay, so what is query folding and how will you implement it? So query folding is the process where Power Query pushes data transformation steps back to the source data instead of performing it in Power BI. So the transformations that you perform in the Power Query editor, those transformations are sent back to the source itself, and those transformations are already applied in the new raw data before pushing it in the Power BI. Okay, so suppose in Power Query editor you have performed a transformation on your table by filtering a column in your data model. Suppose the column is country column and you filtered the data Canada for that particular country column. So only Canada data will be filtered in the Power Query editor. So this transformation that you did in the Power Query editor will be performed in the data source itself by writing an equivalent query. If your query is SQL Server database, then an equivalent query will be written, that is select star from cells where country is Canada. So this transformation step will be pushed back into your source data, that is SQL Server database, and whenever new raw data will come in your source, those transformation will be performed in the new raw data, and before loading it into Power BI, the transformation will be performed and then it will be loaded. Okay, so this will reduce the overall memory which will be used in Power BI. Okay, so it will reduce the overall memory space or the CPU usage in Power BI. It will optimize the data model and it will make the overall report, the loading time of the report will decrease. Okay, so these are the benefits of query folding. So you should remember there are some data sources which perform or supports query folding. So those data sources are Microsoft SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, Snowflake Database, PostgreSQL, Oracle Database, SAP HANA, MySQL. Okay, so these are the data sources which supports query folding. So some of the data sources which does not support query folding are Excel files, CSV files, text files, PDF files, JSON files. Okay, so these data sources do not support query folding. So coming to the next part, how will you implement query folding? So in order to implement, you should ensure that the transformations are foldable by connecting to the data source that supports query folding, which I have already told that you should connect to that particular data source which supports query folding. That is SQL Server, Snowflake, MySQL, Oracle database. These are the some of the sources which supports query folding. Okay, then you should perform filtering, selecting columns, removing duplicates, grouping, and join functions or operations as early as possible. So these operations or transformations such as performing filtering, selecting columns, removing duplicates, so these should be performed at the start of your data transformation steps. Okay, so you should avoid non-foldable operations like custom functions or certain aim code transformations. Okay, so there are some complex aim functions or complex transformations that break query folding, so you should not be using those aim functions or complex transformation steps, so that query folding is active or enabled throughout your data model. Okay, and regularly checking view native query in your Power Query to verify that query folding is still occurring. So in your Power Query editor, these are the applied steps, right, which you have performed on your raw data. So if you right click on any particular applied step, you will see view native query option is there. So if it is grayed out, it means that the query folding is not active at its previous step. I mean the query folding has failed in its previous step. So if you clicked on this previous step and you click on right click and you see view native query option is still disabled, then query folding has failed at its previous step. So this is how you can ensure that query folding is active or not active for a particular step, by right clicking on that particular step and checking whether this view native query option is enabled or not. Okay, so if it's enabled, then it is active at that previous step, and if it is not active, then it has failed at its previous step. Okay, how can we optimize Power BI reports? So we can optimize Power BI reports by measuring the performance of the report with the help of a performance analyzer, in order to check how are the visuals and which are the visuals which are taking more time to load. Okay, so optimizing the DAX queries. So we can optimize the DAX queries which we have written by using variables in our DAX queries. Okay, we can use variables in order to store a particular portion of our calculation and use it later in our DAX query in order to reduce the size of the DAX query and to optimize it. Okay, so reducing unnecessary columns from the data model. So we can reduce the unnecessary columns from our data model in the Power Query editor, which we not require in our calculations or which are not required throughout our calculations. Okay, so we can remove those columns. So next what we can do, we can turn off the auto date and time feature in Power BI. So turning off the auto date and time also helps in making the Power BI reports faster. Okay, then what you can tell, you can say that for faster performance of your dashboard or report, you have implemented star schema as a dimensional data modeling. Okay, so what is incremental refresh and what are the prerequisites for it? So incremental refresh means updating or refreshing only the portion of your data which has changed since its last update. So instead of refreshing the entire data set from top to the bottom, incremental refresh refreshes only that specific portion of your data which has changed since its last update. Okay, so what it does, it reduces the overall time of refreshing your data set and it makes the data model updated. Okay, so what are the prerequisites of incremental refresh? So a date column should be present in your data model. Okay, this is the first prerequisite. Then you need to define two parameters called range start and range end, which will contain the start date and the end date in which you have to perform or which you will perform the incremental refresh in. Okay, so two parameters needs to be defined for incremental refresh, that is range start and range end. And third most important step is it should ensure that query folding is active throughout your data model. So query folding should be active throughout your data model in order to ensure that you can perform incremental refresh. Okay, so how many environments you have worked in? So you should start like in your recent project you have worked across 3 environments, that is development, testing and production environment. Okay, so in development environment, you developed reports, you created data models, you wrote the DAX measures, and you performed the initial level of testing. Okay, so in the testing environment, the QA team or the business users validated your reports. They checked the calculations and they verified the business requirements are working properly or not in your reports. Okay, so in the production environment, after getting approval from the business users, you deployed your reports to the production workspace. Okay, you configured the schedule refresh, you monitored the data refresh failures, and you provided post deployment support for your dashboards and reports. Okay, so have you worked in any cloud data sources or not? So you have to give a positive response for this, because they prefer the ones who have worked with cloud data sources. Okay, so you have to say like that you have worked with Azure SQL database, Azure Data Lake storage, and Snowflake for data extraction. Okay, and you did the reporting part in Power BI. So your responsibilities included connecting to the data sources, performing transformations in the Power Query, building data models, and writing DAX measures. Okay, so you have to answer like this in a positive way. So one thing you should remember, that don't say that you have got zero experience in working with cloud data sources. Okay, so even if you have not worked with any of the cloud data sources, just tell them that you have worked. Okay, just tell them that you have worked with these cloud data sources in connecting to the database, and you perform the transformations in the Power BI. Okay, so coming to the next question, explain the concept of data flow in Power BI. So data flows in Power BI are used to centralize and reuse data preparation. So instead of performing the same data cleaning and transformation steps in multiple reports, what we do, we create a data flow and we store the transformed data in that particular data flow. Okay, and then we allow multiple data sets and reports to connect to that same prepared data which is stored in the data flow. So this improves consistency, it reduces development time, and it also ensures that every report uses the same business logic. Okay, so imagine there are 3 Power BI developers who are creating 3 different type of reports. So but all of them need the same sales data. So without a data flow, each developer imports the data separately and performs the same data cleaning and transformation steps 3 times. Okay, the data flow, one developer prepares and cleans the data once and it stores it in the Power BI service, and other developers, what they can do, they can simply connect to that prepared data and they can use it for their dashboard. So this saves a lot of time and it avoids duplicate work and ensures that every report shows consistent results. Okay, so coming to the next question, what are deployment pipelines? So deployment pipelines in Power BI are used to move the Power BI content safely from one environment to another, ensuring that the reports and the datasets are tested before reaching the end users. Okay, so it mainly consists of 3 stages: development stage, test stage, and production stage. So the developers first create and modify the reports in the development environment. Okay, so then they publish them to the test environment for validation and user acceptance. Okay, so once everything is verified, the same content is promoted to the production environment where the business users access it. So this process reduces deployment errors and it manages version control and ensures a smooth release process. Okay, so giving a short example, if you can think of writing an exam, first what we do, we write or we practice at home. So think of it as the development stage. Then what we do, then we take the mock test to check our preparation. So think of it like the test stage. And finally we appear for the actual exam. So think of it like the production stage. So similar in Power BI, we never directly publish the reports to the business users. We first develop, we then test, and finally deploy to the production. Okay, so for reference picture, you can see first the developer is developing the reports. So under him the tasks are development, build reports, create DAX, data modeling. All the things he is doing is developing the report, and he is using deployment pipeline to deploy the reports to the test environment. So in the test environment, what are the tasks performed? UAT testing, validating the data, fix issues. So these are performed by the QA team or the business users. Okay. Then this report is published to the production environment using deployment pipeline. So in production environment, there are business users who will be accessing your dashboard. Okay, the end users who will be accessing your dashboard. So in production environment, there are business users, there are live dashboards and the final reports. So each of the environment that we are talking of, either development, test or production, is usually assigned a separate workspace. Okay, so development workspace is separate, production workspace is separate and test workspace is separate. So each of the workspace has their separate user level access, and according to the people who will be there in that particular environment, you will be giving them that particular access. Okay. So coming to the SQL question, let's first understand what the interviewer is asking. So in this employees table, you can see that some of the records are completely duplicated. For example, John's record appears twice, Bob's record appears twice, and Emma's record appears twice. So the interviewer is asking us to display each record only once, but there are two conditions. First, we should not delete any duplicate records from the table, and secondly, we should not be using the distinct keyword. Okay, so our job is simple, which is to display only one copy of every duplicate record while keeping all the data intact in the database. Okay, to solve this, we will use a CTE along with row number window function. Okay, so in the first line, I have declared the CTE as, you can think a CTE of a temporary result set. So it stores the output of our query so that we can use it in the next select statement. Okay, so in the next line, we are selecting all the columns that we want to display in our final output, that is select employee ID, employee name, employee salary and department. Okay, so in the next line, so this is the most important part of the query. So row number assigns a unique number to every row. Okay, but notice that we are using a partition by all four columns. So that means SQL groups together records that have the same employee ID, same employee name, same employee salary and same department. Since the duplicate records have exactly the same values in all these columns, they will belong to the same group. Okay, so inside every group, SQL starts numbering from 1. So the first duplicate gets row count is equal to 1. The second duplicate gets the row count is equal to 2, and the third duplicate gets the row count is equal to 3, and so on. Okay, so for example, John appears twice, so both the rows have the same employee ID, same employee name, same salary and department, so they form one partition. So SQL assigns row count is equal to 1 to the first John record and row count is equal to 2 to the second John record. So the same thing happens for Bob as well as for Emma. Okay, so the next line, from employees, here we are simply reading the data from the original employees table and storing the result inside the CT. Okay, so coming to the next part, select employee ID, employee name, employee salary, department and row count. So we are selecting all the columns from the CT in our main query. Okay, so instead of reading all the employees table data, we are now reading the data from the temporary CT that we have already prepared, and it contains the row count column. Okay, so we are selecting only those columns from the CT where row count is equal to 1. So this line removes the duplicate records from the result. So we keep only those rows whose row count is 1, since every duplicate group starts numbering from 1, right? So we are keeping only the first occurrence of every record. So rows with row count 2 or 3 or higher are ignored. So as a result, every record is displayed only once without deleting anything from the table and without using the distinct keyword. Okay, so we use row number with partition by to assign numbers to duplicate records, and then filter only row count is equal to 1 to display only one copy of each record without deleting the data or using the distinct keyword. Okay, so if you like this video, kindly like and subscribe to my channel in order to get ready for your next Power BI or data analyst interview. Okay, it will really motivate me a lot. Thank you so much.